so I'm answering some questions about frappé and about grand bautmès. So frappé in translation means to strike. So what we're doing is we're striking the floor with our toes. This comes from Russian character dance or Russian folk dancing, which became a larger part of ballet later on in its history once we get into ballet russe and the imperial ballet in the later 1800s, earlier 1900s. So what's happening is that this is a motion that comes from the knee extending and flexing back to its position. Frappé can be done to the front, the side, and to the back. So we are doing two of those. We're doing front and we're doing side. The thing that stays the same about frappé that we know about from other things, right? My heel still stays to the front, so I'm accessing the rotation in my gluteus minimus. I'm accessing the rotation of my adductors in the front. I'm also still using my quad and obviously my stabilization leg, the one that's holding me up so I can do all of this work, right? And then same thing to the side. I'm extending just like you would to a dégagé, even if it was off the floor, right? So a way to think about this is the only difference between this and a dégagé is that we add a little bit of a different element. We add a flexing, and then we're striking the floor, right? So I'm in a flexed position. I'm in a rotated position on both feet. As I go to extend, I actually want to touch the floor first. So I'm touching through the floor, and then once my toes make contact with the floor, as if the floor was really hot, I want them to react and release from the floor right away. And then I flex back immediately like a reaction, right? This is like a button. If I had a button on my shoulder and somebody was pressing it every time, that's how you want your reaction to frappé to be. It strikes out really hot and it comes back in really fast. So I'm not so much going down and up as I am skimming the surface with my toes. So my toes are reaching for the ground, but as soon as I get to that top of my toes, I'm pushing off of them and coming into a point, and then I'm bending my knee and coming back in. Brush, strike, and in. If it's easier for you to think about it as a brush, that's another way to look at it. One thing that we want to try to avoid when we're doing frappé is we want to avoid a bounce. So by bounce, I mean the knee dropping up and down, almost like kind of if you would expect an Irish dancer when they do their cuts, right? We see the knee bouncing and moving a lot. This is really just an extension from the knee. So it's not coming up into the rest of the leg. So I really want you to isolate the bending of the knee, and even when it travels to the diagonal and to the side, we're really just activating the flexion and extension of the knee from bent to straight, bent to straight. You can see even if I don't strike the floor, the action of the knee stays the same. What makes the frappé is the actual striking of the floor. Okay? For those of you that have some more familiar experience, you might say, can this be done on relevé, right? Absolutely. Frappé can be done on relevé. So the only difference is that because we're in the air, this one doesn't make contact with the floor. If you're wearing pointe shoes, maybe they might have you depending on the choreography or the instruction. But when we're up on relevé, the striking still happens. It's just that we're a little bit more elevated so the foot doesn't reach the ground as easy. So that's just a frappé, up in the air. So when you're thinking about frappé, we're extending the knee and flexing the knee. It's not going anywhere, right? I'm not changing the placement of my leg. It stays there, and all that changes is the contact and the rotation from front to side. So where my toes are pointing are the only thing that changes. The standing side or the stabilization side is obviously still working. Okay, I'm gonna move on to grand bautmès. Grand bautmès, big kick, right? Grand, I'm sure we all got the idea from that, right? When we order our grande frappuccinos or whatever we get, right, means big. And then bautmès is beating, just like we have petit bautmès, right? So we go from petite to big. We always want to finish with big. So when you're coming through a grand bautmès, we are still activating a lot of the same muscles. This is basically a really big dégagé. This is a really big brush, okay? So the floor is that pattern that we've talked about before, the carbon or whatever it is, that hexagonal pattern, that sandpaper that we want to try to strike. And our foot is the match, and we're trying to light the match. So I'm going to be brushing through, and then when I get to that point, I am going to push off of my toes, but I am going to activate a lot more of my hamstring and my quad to get that leg up, okay? In order to do that, I've got to send my hip bone down, right? By that, here's what I mean. I can lift my leg, and I can also lift my hip bone, right? But now you see I'm leaning back, I'm out of it, I'm out of my alignment, I'm falling. So by that, what I mean by dropping your hip bone is allowing the leg, right? If this is my hip socket, I'm allowing the leg to drop into the hip socket this way, so that way it's the leg doing the work and my hip bone isn't lifting up with my leg, right? We want it to be this action, not this action. To get that feeling, you can really put your hand on your hip and you can start to lift your leg, and you're gonna want it to sink. You're gonna wanna feel almost a separation in between where your hip flexor and right where your pelvic bone is. So right in this area, right next to that, right? I don't want it to feel like I'm getting crunched, but I wanna feel that space that's gonna happen between my second and third finger while my hip goes down into itself. So if you just want to be lifting the leg, and I'll show you from the side, right? My leg is going into the hip, so the hip is going down, so the leg can go up. So I'm not lifting my whole hip bone to get my leg up. I'm lifting my leg and allowing it to naturally go into the socket. Okay, so now when we add the brush, that's how we get that upward movement. That's how we get the flourish that we all like, right? So when I'm here and I'm brushing, as I brush, I'm letting that toe be the top, that top of the match, the lighting, and then at the bottom, I'm letting my hip drop back into place, and then I float it back down, right? We talked about this being in control. I don't want to just kick it up and then drop it back down. Right? My energy can't stop. That just stops your energy. We want it to continue on to go into the next grand bautmès, or to the side, or to the back, wherever it's going to go next. So I still want to control that and float that down, because I want to come back down to 2 feet. 1 foot and 2 feet. Because I need that energy. I need to strike the floor again in order to get that leg up for the next grand bautmès. So I need to control toe ball heel, toe ball heel, toe ball heel, to be able to come back for the next thing. So similar as in all of our rotated positions, you're going to feel the stabilization on the outside of your leg. I want you to feel it in your seat. I want you to be squeezing your seat together, right? I know it feels like you're trying to like hold something from coming out, but that's the energy that we need back there, because we're working in the front, so we've got to have support from the back. Right? That's why you have hamstrings, right? That's how you can walk upstairs. We can't just rely on the front of our legs. That's why we have the back part in order to support the front, and vice versa. So use your backside of your body during all of this, even the standing hamstring. When you're coming through this, remember, it's those toes pushing, and then it'll come into the adductors right here. It'll come into your quads, and then I also want you to use your seat. Once you get into this as well, it is a little bit of lower ab strength. If you're familiar with the exercise of when you lie on your back and you're lifting your legs up and down, trying to keep your lower back on the ground, that's essentially a grand bautmès lying down, right? So we are activating a little bit of the lower core in order to get that leg up, right? If you think about it, hi, these muscles are connected, right? This connection means something. So I am activating my lower core in order order to get my leg up and help me stabilize while my leg is up in the air, front or side. Yeah? So I hope that answers a few more of your questions. If it doesn't, please email me and I can, if we need to get pictures out or if we need to have any other type of demonstrations, let me know. And I hope this helps your frappes and your grand bautmès.